The biggest enemy of wine might not be what you think it is. It turns out that something that is essential for making wine also causes one of the most common flaws in wine, and no one seems to notice. Sommeliers are trained to look for cork taint or oxidation in older bottles, and since the rise of low intervention wines, we are also looking for volatile acidity, mousiness, and bread. However, the most important wine flaw might mainly go unnoticed and could be easily avoided if more of us knew about it. Let me explain, and let's taste how big the problem is in a blind tasting experiment. What does the vine need in order to grow? Come on. Water, nutrients, CO2, and sunlight. Sunlight is essential for photosynthesis, and without sunlight there would be no wine. But after the grapes are harvested, light becomes an enemy, and wine needs to be protected from light. That's one of the reasons why wine was traditionally bottled in colored bottles and stored in dark cellars. Colored bottles reduce the impact of harmful light and therefore protect the wine. Green bottles make a big difference, but dark amber colored bottles are even better at protecting your wine. However, over the course of the last decades, clear bottles have become more popular, particularly for white and rosé wines. Even those wine styles are the most susceptible to light damage. Consumers apparently want to see what's inside the bottle, especially when they buy rosé wines. And nowadays, most rosés are bottled in clear glass bottles. The producers of those wines know something you might not know. This decision has a trade-off, a big one, as the clear glass bottles leave the wine naked and unprotected against light, causing light strike. According to the Oxford Companion to Wine, light strike is also known as goût de lumière in French. It's a damaging effect the light at short wavelengths in the ultraviolet and blue end of the spectrum can have on wine. The light triggers chemical reactions inside the bottle, stripping the wine of flavor and causing funky flavors of garlic, cardboard, and cooked cabbage. Red wines tend to be more protected because of their phenolics, and it's therefore extremely strange why red wines are usually bottled in dark colored bottles, while white wines and rosé wines often aren't. Light strike was first documented in 1977 in a study focusing on the impact of light on champagne, and today the most well-known example of a winery trying to protect their wine from light is Louis Roederer's Cristal, that comes in this iconic clear glass bottle, and that needs to be wrapped in orange cling film in order to protect it from light. Interestingly, wines made using the traditional method are in high risk of developing light strike because of the long time they spend in contact with dead yeast cells, the lees. They build up precursors that will later bring out this weird, funky flavor. But now you might think, okay, Konstantin, but why have I never heard about this problem? This must be a minor issue as no one is talking about it. To be honest, that's what I thought too. But over the last few months, I dug deeper and deeper into the topic and realized that light strike might be a much bigger problem than cork taint, for example. The only thing is, light strike is not as obvious as cork taint. In a study under the catchy title of Flint Glass Bottles Cause White Wine Aroma Identity Degradation, researchers compared wine stored on a supermarket shelf to the same wine stored in the dark. They were using gas chromatography and mass spectrometry in order to analyze the quality of white wines over time, and it was striking how big the impact of light strike was on white wines bottled in clear glass bottles. As a result, they wrote that after only 7 days of shelf life in flint glass bottles, a dramatic loss in terpenes, 10 to 30%, and isopenoids, 30 to 70%, was recorded, whereas colored glass bottles did not evidence such behavior even after 50 days, and darkness preserved the wine's fruity and flowery aromatic integrity, which is pretty striking, as terpenes and isopenoids are two of the primary sources of aroma in wine, indicating that the aroma of a wine can completely change within 1 week of being stored on a shelf in a clear glass bottle. Just think about this. Most wine is sold by the bottle in supermarkets worldwide. Most supermarkets and wine shops turn their lights on, I guess, and some even have windows, and still producers bottle their wines in clear glass bottles, or flint glass bottles as they call them in the study, exposing their products to damage just for marketing's sake. The wine might sit on the shelf for much longer than 1 week, and most of the damage occurs within the first few days anyways. After being purchased, the wine probably doesn't go into a dark cellar, but sits on a kitchen counter for the rest of its life instead, getting more and more damaged by light. The Wine Blast podcast dealt with this issue recently, and they interviewed Rosé expert Elizabeth Gabay, Master of Wine, who estimates that 30% of all rosé she tastes is actually damaged by light strike. And she also argued that the famous Garrigue flavor of Provence rosé might actually come from light strike. I'm putting a link to the podcast episode and the study into the description so you can check that out if you want to. So I want to find out whether the problem is real, and I want to push the boundaries to see how bad the issue really is. I bought 4 bottles at my local supermarket of the exact same rosé, filled in clear glass bottles under screw cap. I chose screw cap in order to avoid cork taint and reduce the risk of oxidation. One of the bottles was sitting on the shelf as I arrived. I don't know for how long, but it had been sitting in the light. The other 3 bottles came straight from a closed case, and I'd guess that the wine was probably put into that case directly after being bottled, not having been exposed to any light at all. One of the bottles sat out in the sunshine for 2 days, not even 2 days, close to 2 days. It's still winter here or early spring, but it was kind of sunny one day. The rest of the time was pretty cloudy, so it didn't actually get all that much sun. This bottle here was sitting in a display fridge for 2 days for the same period, being exposed to artificial light and not direct sunlight. And this bottle was just in the dark bottle bag the whole time, so it didn't see any light at all. So let's see whether even after 48 hours, I'm able to tell a difference between those 4 wines. Let's go. So as per usual, I've put little labels on the glasses. This one says AL for artificial light. This one says shop for the wine that was sitting on the shelf in the shop. This one says NL for no light. And this one says DL for daylight. Make sense? I hope so. So now I'm going to take these babies for a spin using my patent pending randomizer. That reminds me, I should check on the patent process there. But anyways, let's turn around and then taste the wines. What? This is fascinating. This is not the same wine. I mean, it is the same wine, but it tastes differently. I mean, there's such a pronounced difference between this wine on my left and the other 3. It's just striking. You really don't have to be a master of wine in order to smell that there is something else going on. So it is obvious. So if I compare those 2 wines, this one actually has a fine, elegant flavor profile. It smells a little bit of raspberries and strawberries. That's kind of what you would expect from a rosé from Côtes du Rhône. Well, this one is funky. It does smell of garlic and a little bit sulfury. I also could see how I would think this might be a little garrigue, a little bit, well, savory. But yeah, it's just crazy that those are the same wines. So just to be very precise, these wines are not just the same vintage, same producers, same origin. They are also the same lot number. So they've all been bottled together from the same barrel, tank, whatever. And they came on the same shipment in the same box, so all of it was exactly the same, but they taste completely different. The other 3, there's not such a big difference between the other 3. I'd say this one is maybe the most pristine, and the other ones are a little bit more funky, especially this one. But I think I wouldn't if I wouldn't know that there's something going on, I wouldn't actually say that there's a difference. But this is just bad. And that after 2 days. Well, I mean, what is it? I hope it's not the one that was stored in the dark. Otherwise, I really have to get more light into my cellar down here. I'm guessing that this was the wine that was stored in the sunlight. But remember, it's cold outside. So it wasn't warm. It wasn't the heat. It was just slightly sunny with a little bit of cloudiness as well. So it was exposed to sunshine for less than 48 hours and it just tastes completely different. Well, that is if I'm correct. Shall we look? So like I said, I'm guessing this is the daylight wine, and it is the daylight wine. This is just mind-blowing to me. It might be quite nerdy, but I'm just kind of going, wow. So like I said, the other three are all fine. I wouldn't be 100% sure which one is which, but if I'd have to guess, I would say this one is probably the one stored in the dark, and it is. It's the no light one. Well, those two are a little less precise. So those must be the ones stored in the shop with no natural light, but artificial light. And this one, the one that was stored in this little fridge with artificial light for 48 hours. And yeah, it also shows a little bit, a tiny little bit. But remember, those were only like 2 days. I don't know how long this actually was stored in the shop for on the shelf. This might have been less than 2 days on the shelf. I can't really tell, but there is a slight difference there. And I'm pretty sure that in a week or two, I would notice a big difference. But this is just insane. I mean, if you store your rosé wine anywhere close to a window, really think twice, because you're losing out on a lot of quality. Because, yeah, I mean, this after 2 days, well, I think I'm repeating myself, but mind blown. All right, this was absolutely fascinating for me, at least. I think I will never look at clear glass bottles the same way. This just showed that there is a pronounced difference and that you're really damaging your wine if you put them into clear glass bottles. So if you're a producer, please don't do that. If you're a consumer, please don't buy that. If you have to buy it, because I mean, you can't really buy rosé wine that isn't in a clear glass bottle, keep it in the cellar and make sure that it doesn't get sunlight before you want to open it, and make sure that you don't buy a bottle that was sitting on a shelf for a long time or at all. Buy a bottle straight from the case, ask them to open a case for you or give you one from the warehouse in order to make sure that you're getting the real deal. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little experiment. If you did, then please like it down here, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. My question of the day is your mind blown as well? Because mine clearly is. Whatever you do, stay thirsty and stay out of the sunlight.